and welcome to this episode of Mind the Gap, making education work across the globe, with me, Tom Sherrington, and Emma Turner. Hello, Emma.
Hi, Tom. You all right? You well?
Yeah, very good. And we have got an exciting episode. Been looking forward to this for a long time. The one and only, the mighty Hywel Roberts. Welcome, Hywel. How are you doing?
I'm buzzing. Thanks so much for having me along, Emma, Tom. Honestly, I'm so excited. Thanks for having me. And I'm saying thanks for having me along, and I've not even done anything yet.
Well, last time I saw you, Hal, last time I spoke to you online was during the pandemic, and you were broadcasting from your shed.
Yeah, I've gone up in the world now. I'm actually in the house, so that's good. But the shed was good because it doubled as a kind of studio bar. You know what it was like in those times.
Oh yeah, it was a studio bar. I think I need one of those in my life. So we're going to talk to you a lot about, we'll just see how we go. We're going to talk to you about botheredness and other things. But I just want to sort of reminisce a little bit, because this came up on a Twitter feed recently. Clevedon Teach Meet, something like 2012.
Yes,
so I can't remember this exact time of year, but it was the first Teach Meet I'd ever been to, and you were the star. You were the star turn. I think it came as like a school stage at Clevedon, and it had like Mark Anderson was the one who organised it. He was like the kind of the forerunner of all this stuff, way ahead of everyone.
Yeah, and
you came on like a sort of. Wait, I think he had a sort of gold lame suit or something. There was like a car on the stage. It was all kind of high production values.
It was bonkers. It was bonkers, and it was great because it was my first Teach Me, and I found myself keynoting, which was lovely and wonderful. And it was quite far away from where I live. It was because it's Bristol, isn't it? And
yeah,
it was an epic journey to get down there and just to do 20 minutes, but it felt really special and wonderful. Yeah, and it cropped up, didn't it, last week? I think Mark had found some pictures or something.
Yeah. But it's a funny time, because before that had happened, the idea that a bunch of teachers would gather in their free time and just sort of talk about teaching. I mean, obviously it had happened before, but it wasn't like that. And since then, so many things have happened, and the social media has taken off. And it was the first time I'd ever been to an event where I was thinking, oh, you're that one off Twitter. You're that one off Twitter. It was really great. That was like over 10 years ago.
Yeah, I felt the same, and it was great it was just great to be part of it. And you're right, it's obviously a lot's moved on and so on, but it's great to see that there's still some life in that sort of meeting up, chatting, talking and reflecting. I know I've obviously loads of Teach Meets. I don't know if I think there's still Teach Meets that go on, and I know the Brew Eds were going strong. And it's a great to be part of that sort of stuff. I love it, mate.
Well, the last time I saw you live, I wasn't even at the event. I was at the same venue in a different part of the kind of arena bit. You were outside at Leicester Racecourse on like the hottest day ever in the history of everything. But everybody kept talking about the man in the tent is amazing. The man in the tent. And I was doing my first ever big keynote, like 400 people, watched by Mary Meyer with you next door in a marquee. I was like, this is the most stressed I've ever been in my life.
Emma, you're too kind. I mean, it was boiling. I do remember that gig, and it was absolutely roasted. And they sent someone off, one at Lackey's was sent to go and get a fan. And it was just, he came back with something about the size of a 7-inch single, if that means anything. But it was like tiny. I used that day as part of my weight loss method. It was that hot.
Leicestershire go back really early, so it was sort of like mid to late August, height of the summer. Hundreds of people rammed into this marquee with you in there. It was brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
It was bonkers. It was like a wedding, wasn't it? It was like a wedding, but.
So look, we have to sort of. I mean, so I've known about you and followed you for years, all the stuff that you do, and it's so interesting. I love it on this back of this book that I'll talk about in a minute. It describes you. It says he was recently described as a world leader in enthusiasm, How does it feel to be a world leader in enthusiasm, Hal?
It's wonderful. It's absolutely wonderful, Tom. And I can promise I'm not like that all the time.
Oh, really?
No, I'm really not. And but I can, like all good educators, I can switch it right on. No, it was nice when someone said that. It was
You know,
very.
this is what I associate with you. You have this amazing gift. I saw you on, I think it was an event in Germany, randomly, an event we were both at, and I watched your talk, and you have this amazing power to kind of soften everyone up. It's like warm them up with a few gags, very funny, great story, and everyone's going ha 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 ha, and Johnny, and you're like, and then all of a sudden you just go poof, and like you just suck at people with this like emotional punch, and everyone's like the whole. I was like, wow, it's just really, it's so affecting. You have this amazing way of just bringing people on this journey and humor and softening up to then make such a powerful message. And it's something you've obviously worked on and with the audience, but it's an amazing way of getting ideas across in teaching. So I mean, is that something you felt you kind of need to do? Is it just come spontaneously to you?
I think it's about comfort, isn't it? I think when I started teaching 30 years ago this September, that was my first proper year's paid teaching. And I found a lot of it quite instinctive. And that's not, I'm not saying I was great at it, but I found I was quite instinctive about it. And I think I quickly realized how to win over classes. And it was at a time as well when, as a newest one in, you got all the bottom sets. I was an English teacher. And so you had to kind of learn quickly on it, really. And I think just, you described it as like softening up and using humor and stuff. I think it's always been as part of my, without sounding, I don't want to sound silly at all, but it's part of my toolkit was just, if you like, surviving those starting days as a what was an NQT or probationary teacher in those days, just seeing if I could do it. And no one had spoken to us about the science of teaching. There was no books really that were like we can get today. It's quite easy to find a good book about education written by someone who knows what they're on about, I think. And we've got a lovely choice these days, whereas back then there really wasn't anything. So a lot of it was instinctive. And I think humor, and I mean, we can call it warmth, call it whatever. It's not a fake thing. It's just part of how do you win people over, and how do you help get people protected into listening almost. And I know I still talk about that now. How do we protect our kids into stuff that might be really abstract or really challenging for them? Part of the role of a teacher, I suppose, is to make it accessible, without, in a very human way. So by telling them, by showing them, and by just unveiling it to them, if you like. So I think I forgot what your question was. That's what's happened to me. But I think it's I think just I don't think it's something. Oh, that's it. So when I went freelance, because I only went freelance really just for a year. I just got to a point. My school was going to get knocked down, rebuilt, taken over, all that kind of stuff. There was going to be big changes, and I just thought, well, I want to explore that idea of being an advisor, or I don't know. That's the only example I had really. I didn't know what an education consultant did. I didn't know anything about that, but I was classroom fresh. So I joined Twitter as well. 2009 it was, and I was able to get, if you like, get an audience quite quickly. And get work quite quickly because of my freshness out of class, and I was quite serious in those days. Honestly, I was quite like straight when I was presenting to teachers, and I found that it wasn't really me. I wasn't really being myself. So I remember doing a secondary inset day where I was prepared and everything, but I thought, God, I think I'm boring. So I was trying to be what I thought.
Playing the role of the boring consultant.
Yeah, I thought I was just going to, yeah, because that's all teachers say, isn't it? It's like, oh, we've had this person in talking about this. But I just realised I needed to be myself a little bit more. And since then, obviously, my year out became another year out, and then I'll go into class still now, which we can talk about this time, but predominantly I've just learned to be myself and very relaxed into it now.
No, have you seen a Hywel masterclass?
I have, and I was going to ask him about, is the warmth and is the relationship thing and is the kind of whole, drawing people in and the sucker punch, is that linked to your kind of thinking around the importance of story in teaching? Is that all kind of tied together?
I think it is, but I think, Emma, in honesty, it's a happy accident. I find myself
there. Oh, teeing you up there to go, yeah, it's all incredibly well thought through.
It's just an accident. And it's all teachers should be good at telling stories. You do it, Emma, in your work. Tom definitely does it in his work. We tell the stories. We're in that privileged position. And we advocate for the children, but we're also advocating for the teachers, because I'm sure in your work, as it is in mine, a lot of my work at the moment is how do we keep people motivated in difficult times, really difficult and challenging times. How do we keep people feeling like they're doing something to be really, really proud of? I remember telling my mum and dad that I got onto a PGCE, and I were thrilled. I mean, my dad were overwhelmed because he was a teacher, and I just remember him being absolutely overwhelmed, bursting with pride. And I just want that back, I want everyone to feel like that. As a parent now myself, like I want if my son came back and said, I wanted to be a teacher, I want to be bursting with pride, but at the moment it feels quite hard, all that. So what we need to do is share the good stories, the difficult stories, and as certainly in the work that we do, but certainly as teachers, we need to be, we need to look at story and the delivery of a yarn as a good way of showing kids the world, but also showing our colleagues the world as well.
Oh, you're so good at that. I can still remember, this is one I pictured. You had us. I can still remember it now. Is that you're talking about? I think this is on the back of the Oops book, which is your one, which is so many accidental learning and this idea of kind of making magic happen. And you talked about you're saying, imagine there was. We didn't even say like imagine. You sort of create this thing that the students do imagine. You sort of say, can you see that cave door? Yeah. I wonder what's in there. It's like everyone, I swear to God, is looking around, going, looking to see the cave door, like as if it must be there.
Yeah.
And he just had us all like turning around in our seats to look at the back of the hall to see if there's a cave door up there.
Yeah.
That is just that commitment to the thing, not saying imagine if. It's like, no, let's make it real. That's fantastic.
It's professional imagination, Tom, and it's something that's been eroded over the last, dare I say, definitely decade, where that power to be if you like, the Sherpa, if you imagine you've got your class of kids, and there could be year twos, there could be year nines, but they are year nines or they are year twos. So we know what we've got to teach. That's agreed. That's the should curriculum. We know what we've got to teach, and we will teach that because we don't want to get into trouble. But what we can do is put an imaginative acetate over that document, and we can warm it up and think, right, these are my kids now, and I'm going to teach them. This is my pedagogy. Today it is appropriate for me to use a let's say. We'll call it a let's say rather than let's imagine or let's pretend. So let's say there's a man standing on a motorway bridge. This is year 9. Let's say there's a man standing on a motorway bridge, and he's gripping. Look, I'll show you. He's gripping. So this is the way I'm talking to the class. He's gripping, really gripping. You can see his white knuckles. He's gripping the handrail. And the kids start saying, is he going to jump? Is he jumping? No, I don't think he is jumping. No, I don't think he is. Don't shout out. Let me just tell you. Because wrapped around the handrail are football scarves. And there's flowers that are wrapped around here. And down here, there's a crash helmet. And it's got a name on it. It says Luke. Let's say this is Luke's dad. What's going on here? And that draws the kids in. And all it is painting a picture. Now, I've still got my high expectations. I'm still having the kids listening. I'm, if you like, I'm painting a scene for them, but I'm insistent on it, and I mean business with it.
Yeah.
What we're going to go into is something around teen suicide. So it can be quite grim, that. But I think a lot of people associate me with lovely, brilliant, fantastical stuff, which I really love doing, especially obviously with our little ones. But the pedagogy can be engineered, if that makes sense. And that's what I write a lot about in the book.
Yeah. So, but let's talk about it now, because it's sort of like we haven't mentioned it properly yet. I wanted to do a big announcement. Here we go. Look, this is it, folks. Botheredness. Stories, stance, pedagogy. This is an amazing book.
I'm so proud of it.
It's amazing. It's absolutely fantastic. And I've heard Hal talk about this a couple of times, and there's a whole kind of concept of botheredness to do with the individual students, getting them to be bothered, you being bothered about them. And it's one of those things where I just think it's fantastic, because it's got this sort of inspirational aspect where you think, oh gosh, I'd love to be able to do that. But then you give people tools. I want to talk a bit about them, because it's like, it doesn't just say, be Hywel Roberts, because that's not sustainable, is it? You can't and that, to be honest with you, when I watch you do stuff, I just think, this is what's good. You sort of show what's possible through the way you do it, but then there are tools, and then you think, okay, yeah, that's something. I have to be me in the classroom, but I could use that. And that thing, like a let's say, is you can try that out, can't you? You can try that. And but that I want to just explain to people what, for you, botheredness means as a whole concept.
It was.
Take your time with it. I mean,
it was very much it wasn't a lazy word, but I just didn't have the I haven't got it now. I couldn't articulate the what I felt, and I go back to being a novice teacher, and actually something that I think I did right at the start of my career was decide to be a presence in the school. So not just teach me lessons, but to get involved. It's something I recommend when I'm working with trainees. Get stuck in. There's no time. You're tired. You're knackered all the time. But just get stuck in. And if you don't like football, go and help out at the football practice. If you don't want to sing, go and join the choir. And if they're into choir, go and start one. Just try and do as much as you can. And I wanted kids to see that I was present as a member of staff. This was in a big secondary school, and I think that I went from there to work and help out in when I went freelance. I got a good contract with an SEMH school, so they just paid me a daily rate. Essentially, they couldn't put me on the books full time, but it was great for my own, genuinely for my own CPD. It was amazing, because what I saw in that school was people who loved the kids, these challenging, angry, sometimes traumatized kids. The adults in that setting were just really, really 100% bothered about them. And that's when I started thinking about botheredness. And what we needed to work on there, and part of my role at that setting, was they were really good on the sort of relational stuff, the love stuff, but they needed to up the game really on the learning on a curriculum that mattered and that would count. And that's where I started thinking about, how do we protect our kids in? Because some of those kids were not interested at all. So it was, how do we to almost trap them into it, which is where that sort of accidental learning phrase came from. And I started talking about imagineering, imagine, how do we get the kids to work in the imaginative? And we can do that. I remember doing it with, I remember setting up with, again, I think with Key Stage 3 boys in the PRU. It was, we just set up the topic of study was healthy eating. So we just set up a kebab shop, and we sort of we marketed it to the point where we all really kind of thought it was real. And it was, how do we source healthy hot dogs? And basically we were doing we were doing the should curriculum, but we were doing it in such a way that it protected the kids in, and they enjoyed it. You know, that there was a lot of fun. And going back to the botheredness word, it's finding the context. I talk about stories all the time, and I think sometimes that can put some people off. They think it's a bit fluffy. So I'll talk about context instead. It's context. It's all about context. And that brings in, I think, sometimes my colleagues in HE and so on, when I'm working with them, I talk about context, but everyone gets it. Everyone understands the power of story and all the cognitive science around it that's coming out all the time about the power of narrative and the power of story. It's not everything, but it's a good part, and it's the part I'm interested in. And I think when I talk about botheredness, it is about getting the kids bothered, but it's also us as professionals thinking about, how are we in class? What's it like to be taught by me? And, you know, and how am I, if you like, bringing into my classroom that lovely feeling of presence? And I don't mean presence in terms of charisma. I mean just that feeling of being part of something. So I use that lovely phrase, and that we're in a joint productive activity. Another time I'll be, got my PowerPoint, I'm going to show you stuff, I'm going to tell you stuff. But for now, we're going to be in this, we're going to be working together inside this. We're going to be examining the story of this man on the motorway flyover. We're going to be examining the story of the lost tribe member in a Guatemalan rainforest. Do you know what I mean? So we can, it's all about people, it's all about place, it's all about problems. And please jump in and stop me, because I can carry on for quite some time. But that botheredness is really, it's reclaiming our mojo. It's reclaiming what it is to teach. That sounds a bit grand, but that's really what the book is about.
But it's the human experience, isn't it, Hal? If you think about how we've transferred information before we could write, before we could do anything, it was through story. That is the absolute kind of crux of how humans have learned, by telling and retelling and reframing and reshaping experience through story. And I do think, and because I work with little ones all the time, story is how young children make sense of the world as well, isn't it?
100%. And a story, when I work in early years, a story is quite as simple as me just drawing a messy garden on a whiteboard and saying, my garden's messy. Can you help me? And it places kids in the role of contributors, of people who are supporting others. It makes, I mean, for me, it just takes us down that wonderful, like you said, the wonderful endeavor really of what it is to be a good person, a good human. And we can have as many PHSE worksheets in the world as you want, but really getting kids to feel it is how we get that. We achieve that. And I love working. I'm not an experienced early years teacher at all, but I've got such a faith in the process that, you know, I outline in the book. I've got such a faith in it. I'll go and have a go. And what I've found is it just works. Because, like you say, Emma, stories are what unite us. Absolutely.
Can you say a bit more about protect them in? Because I remember when I first heard you using that phrase, I thought I'd misheard you, and I thought you meant project them in or something like that. And I think no, and I think okay, no, you do mean protect them in, and then you explained it in the talk. But I was really, to me, that was really captivating to me, that that's a concept which I think, you know, quite a lot of people would be thinking, what do you mean exactly? So
okay,
talk us through that.
I think it's that thing. You've got a class of children, and I know we'll all work in, and listeners will be working in lots of different sorts of schools all around the world. If I just pick a class in a school, and it's an amalgam of many classes probably, but let's say there's this lovely, I think I write about a similar story in the book. You know, there's little Maisie. We're going to learn about Romans. So the first thing that Maisie's parents do when they go on the school website to check out the curriculum is they get the camper van loaded up and they all tootle off to Hadrian's Wall and then have a nice weekend in York. And then sitting in the same classroom is Tommy, who hasn't got a bed, you know, who hasn't got access to that stuff. So you got the same kid, you got two children in a class, let's say in year 4 in an English school, year 4, they're doing Romans, but one kid is already advantaged. He's already, and it's great. It's great. That's great. But then we've got little Tommy as well. And what the teacher's going to have to do is protect them both in. But for Tommy just might need a little bit more, because what we're going to have to do is look at timelines. What we're going to have to do is understand that Romans is ages ago. And, you know, I mean, I've been telling this story recently because it happened to me in a Peru in Sheffield, where, you know, as a kid he hadn't been kicked out, he'd absented himself from his class because he hated Romans. And when I asked him, why do you hate the Romans? He just said, because they're ages ago. And then I went into this Monty Python thing. I don't know if your listeners will remember Life of Brian, but I ended up sitting there just saying all the great things that the Romans had done. You know, do you remember that in Life of Brian? And I just, and eventually I said, what do you love, to this kid? He was called Maxwell. I said, what do you love, Maxwell? And he said, camping. So he told me all about camping and how he goes camping to Filey and Whitby and all down the east coast of England. And I got him back into class, and the challenge was simple. It was, how do we as grown-ups link the Roman invasion of Britain, right, in 55 BC or whatever? How do we link that with camping? And you've just done it. You've just done it in your head. You've just linked it. And that is protecting the kids in. So it goes right back to professional imagination again. If we don't do that, then what we end up being is grown-ups who are not giving the kids the fair crack of the whip. We're not giving them the chance to be successful. And I'd rather be, to use the language of, I think it's Judith Kleinfeld, I talk about it in my book, but I'd rather be a warm demander. So I want to be warm, I want to be relational, but also I want the kids to succeed, and I want the challenge to be there as well. So sometimes the work that I'm asking the kids to do, whether they're in year 1 or year 10, the challenge is there because of the dilemma that the story brings, you know.
No, it's really interesting listening to you, Hal, because there is a kind of a weird dichotomy with some people, that they think that you can't have high expectations and still be engaging, interesting, human, and I don't want to say entertaining as in edutainment, but kind of have the kids in the palm of your hand. And it's so refreshing to hear that those two things can and should coexist. High expectations, high aspirations, alongside that hugely enticing, academically seductive aspect of storytelling.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be fluff. Nothing has to be fluffy. I mean, one of the reasons I did a master's in it is because I didn't have the reading behind what I was finding quite natural. I'll be honest, and that's why I did a master's. I wouldn't have been able to do it as a full-time teacher. It's too hard being a teacher. It's too hard. So I did a master's because I thought I'm getting away with stuff here without really understanding it. And part of my, what I'm offering in the book now is really an account of my own learning, professional learning that I've had to do over the last sort of 10 years or so. And an investigation as well, going into class and thinking, oh, the kids are loving this, but are they learning anything? And actually challenging myself. And if you like, rising above the edutainment of it, because I think I could get away with that. I could certainly get away, and you know this, you can get away on the conference circuit just cheering people up at the moment. If you've got a couple of gags and a graph, you're sorted. You've got to have more substance, haven't you?
My talk then. No, sorry. You've been to my talk then. No, I know what you mean. But so, I mean, some of the scenarios, I mean, this is what I want to get into in a way, because there's only one of you. And the stuff like, what I love is that when you've got these pictures of your work. So there's one of the scenarios, which is great. It's in the chapter about the factory, they're closing down the factory, and it turns out, spoiler alert, that it's the Willy Wonka factory, and the kids are like, oh my god, it says WW on the sign, and going, no, it's that. And you describe this whole thing of shining a torch in and seeing what we can find, and the kids are all with you, and then this kid decides that he's, you know, he's Charlie Bucket, and he's like, I'm Charlie Bucket, and they're all into it. But I can imagine you doing it. But how do you get other teachers to do this stuff? What sorts of things will do to work with teachers to say, you could do this too?
I mean, that using that example, I mean, I think, you know, I've got my greatest hits, you know, and I put them in the book, but every you know few weeks there's a brand new kind of scenario that's bubbled up that I'm thinking about, and I may use again in a different setting and so on. But the old abandoned factory is great because there's that idea of being like urban explorers, but we're not, you know, it's all done in a kind of imagined place. It's not a wow day, you know, that we used to get in primary schools a lot, you know, drop down days in secondary sometimes. It's just really, let's say there's an old factory. If we're going to go inside it, what do we need to take with us? So straight away, the kids are in chat, the kids are deciding, and I'm using the language we. So I'm in it with them, and that's that joint productive activity.
Well, there's like the pictures are kind of, there's no special kit. It's like
No.
you've sort of gone in like hands free almost. There's some paper and some whiteboards, and you create it. It's all created in their heads because you make it so. But do you find teachers can emulate your style? And
in the schools, thanks, Tom. In the schools I work with, we have to go beyond like the flashbang inset day, much like all your work, you know, your work, Emma's work. We can probably do a hit and run inset day, but what I don't think that's satisfactory enough now, because it's we want more, and for me, I just want to have a little bit more impact. And what I've found, the model that works, is that I stay in touch with as many schools as I can, and they share their stuff with me, be it on social media or they share their journey, you know, and a lot of it at the moment, or over the last few years, has been, we've tried a let's say, and instead of just doing the should curriculum, which is the published curriculum, they've really got their heads around this could curriculum, I call it, which is kind of the curriculum that you're doing with your kids, who you love the kids you've got. It's this crew, my crew, we're doing Great Fire of London. Is it great? Oh, it's brilliant. You know, it's, you know, and it becomes our thing. Now, I guess in terms of saying to a bunch of stressed out ECTs, right, go teach like this, it can be a huge culture shift for them. But all it is, it's saying, here's another way. There's loads of good other ways. There's not just one way. And that's the kind of thing that we've fallen into, isn't it, over the last, certainly in England, you know, we've fallen into that there is just one way. And if you look to Wales, which, I mean, you could do hours and hours about what's going on in Wales, but at the very least, they've said to their teachers, here's 12 ways you could do it. and use that as your menu. For me, I know that you can't use anything I talk about all the time. So I guess it's encouraging teachers to be agile in their pedagogical choices. So it's not appropriate to teach in the way I like doing, you know, for some aspects of curriculum. So that's teaching in an appropriate way there. But for this, let's absolutely do it like this. If we're doing about space with Key Stage 1, or flight, let's say, flight with early years, let's do flight with early years, and let's learn about that. Let's look at pictures of the Wright brothers, but let's also think about Frost, Robert, what's his name? Frost, the guy who invented flight in Wales. Now, you won't know about him because no one knows about him, because all his witnesses went and got drunk, and they didn't take a camera with them. It was 1896. And he crashed his plane into it, but he flew, and there's just great stories to get the kids excited. Now, I found when I start relaying those stories to the teachers stop going on to the typical resource websites that feed them, but actually start thinking imaginatively for themselves. What will my kids like? What will little Tommy like? What will Maisie like? And I'll bespoke it for them. Sorry, I've gone off on one, but you get me drift.
I do. I mean, I've got so it's like I've got like corners turned down in this book I want to talk to you about. But like I feel like I just enjoy listening to you explain it, because it's so, there's passion, but there's also, this is, you're doing it now, there's like the passion with the humor, but also there's an intensity there. There's a mission. It's just so infectious. You know, you want to be on a mission as a teacher.
Yeah, well, it should be a mission.
Do you think there's been a devaluing of the power of imagination in education?
I think so, and I think it was it was kind of predictable, I suppose, as soon as we got big tech, because big tech is just so helpful and brilliant, and it is, and it's wonderful. I love PowerPoint. I do. I think it's great. It's an integral part of my presenting stuff. It is absolutely brilliant. But then it gets taken to the nth degree. So before you know it, we've got teachers who've been, if you like, their imagination has not been welcomed in. It's not seen the light of day, because and there's so much more, isn't there? And I don't need to, from an English perspective, that sort of imagination has been cruelly sidelined, I'd say. Just even the use of drama, and drama pedagogy. I don't mean, I mean, I do mean drama as a subject in its own right, but just in, primary drama, it's just great. But if you haven't got the people who are up for it in your school, it could just not happen. And, and the same goes for music. And it's that playful imagination. I do think it has been eroded. And that's why sometimes when I work with new teachers, I think sometimes they think I'm from Mars.
I totally agree, though, because I just think about what we value in schools and what we're measuring that children can do, and how much value or otherwise we place on developing this imaginative response to things. Or not.
Well, I think I work with people who invite me in and stuff, and are happy to have time with me. They're up for it. And I think one of the reasons I'm really busy now, and I have been busy consistently, because I think people have sort of imagination guilt, because everyone's got that. I think most people have got, who are in education, have got good moral purpose, have got great values. It's just that some have lost their way or found themselves in an institution where they don't match. And I think, I get imagination guilt. People want me in, say, I need my teachers to be more imaginative. And the teachers are imaginative. It's just that we need to make the space for it to happen. And certainly the work that I share from a primary perspective, rather than a subject specific, it's kind of in the world of the humanities in primary. And a lot of my, people who know a lot more about history and geography than I do, they've warmed to the approach, because it makes those subjects come to life, rather than just sit flatly on a sheet or a screen or a textbook.
Students, it's so interesting, all this. I'm so fascinated in it, because I feel like I saw a lesson recently which was about ecosystems in something like year 8, and I was kind of dying, because what was being shown to the students was a clip from Finding Nemo, and I was thinking, are you kidding me? Like, having not seen you could probably Google beautiful ecosystem underwater world and see like a real place with all that stuff really happening, and you've gone for a facsimile, a cartoon. It's not a real thing. And I was thinking, that's a poverty of experience. But then sometimes that thing of just knowledge, facts, knowledge, being divorced from the capacity to make the connections, that imagining, is actually one of hardcore cogsci things, which is that you have to imagine things you can't see, like what's happening in your body, or particles, or light. You have to imagine processes, and that's it. The narratives and all that, it's part of it. And the skill of, can you imagine, can you see in your mind's eye, whatever. So you've got this sort of structures, things like, well, let's say is one of them, but you also have some other things like, I don't know, stages, narrative, all these sort of different sort of structures to what you're saying. And they appeal to me. So in the back of your book, you've got all these sort of suggested things like the Vikings, and you talk about the narrative hook could be this, the people, the place, the problem. And as soon as I start seeing that type of structure, I think I can engage with that as me. I mean, do you find that kind of structure really helps people to get into the sort of kind of teaching you do?
Yes, it does. And the reason I put those plans in was to help the reader, and if they're a teacher, it might help them, just to give them some examples of how it might roll out. So we've got the curriculum around Vikings, but what we're going to do is we're going to, let's say we're the Viking community and we've arrived here. Why are we choosing to settle here? And we're placing ourselves right in it. And it goes back to the 3 basic elements of story: people, place, problem. That's every story ever. If you can imagine removing problem, you've just got people in a place. The most boring episode of EastEnders ever. Everyone getting on. Can you mind my stall? Yeah. So we are Vikings and we've got a community, but we are people in London living by the river in 1666, so it's finding the dilemma through which the children have to wade, if you like. The children have to move through that dilemma, and that's where knowledge becomes important, because the kids need to know stuff to find solutions. So it's not just remaining in fantasy. It's actually it's very realistic. And one of the things I talk to teachers about is we've got to mean business with this. Otherwise it is just, it's rooted too much in, I was going to say play then, but I think you know what I mean. It becomes an empty thing rather than the iterative play, actually, that it is. So the structure is there in the book. And I made those actually during lockdown for a big trust of schools who just wanted examples. They really, the teachers were really having a go, but they just wanted some black and white, if you like. They wanted the paperwork, Tom. They wanted the chuffing paperwork, mate. That's what they want. But it really helped me. It helped me sort of get a framework.
I've just had a thought how this is. I've just written a note. Sorry, I should notice this up. But it's make believe to make things understood. There you go. That's what I take away.
Translate that into Latin and we'll get some right gigs, Emma.
You cheeky so.
We will. We'll be able to nail it.
I mean, do you think you need to sort of pre-teach some of the, like, is there a combination? So when you're doing the Romans, the Vikings, you sort of, some of the questions you're asking, like what technology would they need, or if we're Vikings, what jobs do we need in order to establish our settlement? So there's this combination of students from their perspective, thinking what we might need, but then you still then have to sort of say, well, this is what they actually did, or do you know what I mean? So where does the kind of their imagining hit kind of solid facts, or is there a conflict there?
There may be, and I think that we need to teach. Teaching is teaching, and what in terms of making it memorable, in terms of making it stick, I think one way of doing it is in the way I suggest. There may be other ways as well. There are other ways, but I think, if I've got a kid, I was talking to some kids in year 1 who, the Great Fire of London, I've got that in my head now because we've mentioned it, but that might have happened last week to them. So when we start talking about 1666, actually, that doesn't necessarily help, because we need to make sure they understand timelines. And so if you like, the knowledge, the the protecting in, Tom. That's what it is. It's saying, right, it happened a long time ago. So in that class, I said, what didn't we have in 1666? And they're only year one. What didn't we have in 1666? And a kid said Greg's. And I said, you're right, but do you know what? There is a bakery. Oh. And when the teachers watched me do that, they were all like, oh, that's amazing. And afterwards they were like, how did you do that? And I'm just thinking, that's just being an agile adult. That's just having an imagination. And you can't go on a course for that. You just got to you've got to know your stuff, haven't you? And
agile is so interesting. So one of the things that, you always have your anecdotes. So one of mine is around, teachers needing to enjoy themselves, be themselves, spur of the moment stuff. And one of my son's favorite lessons that he talked about, those you remember them as a parent more than the kids do, because they come and tell you, and you remember the days the kids come home from school and tell you, oh my God, this is what we did at school today. And one of them, my son's lessons was in year 5 when they had a power cut, and it was in the winter, so it was proper dark after lunch, and they sat there, and he said, it was amazing. We were in the dark for 3 hours, and we just had a conversation, and that's what they called it. And we had a conversation about the end of the world. Yeah. And I just thought, oh, that's epic. So the teacher just thought, you know what? Let's do this. We're in the dark. Imagine. And he just was like, that was the best day ever. Yeah. And I was thinking, this is the sad bit about that. Yeah. In that school, because of the culture there, which was a bit formal, lots of bookwork, which you were shown at parents' evening, like, what's all this? And the teacher would never have done that if it hadn't been a real power cut. So we used to say, isn't it sad that our son's favourite lesson in year 5 happened by accident? But at least the teacher had the gumption to respond to it. But you're thinking, what if that power cut had never happened? That lesson wouldn't have ever taken place. And he wouldn't have thought in that school, hey, you know what, guys, should we turn the lights off and imagine the end of the world? And that's the spirit you want to have. You want to have that. Yeah. Why can't I do that?
It's that agility. And whilst doing the job that you've been paid to do, whilst doing it, and not letting anyone down.
Well, yeah, exactly. And so, Emma, what are your experience of this? Are you going to go off and start?
Do you think I really need any encouragement to go off on a tangent?
I don't think she does.
No.
How's talks to my soul. This is very much how my experience of teaching in primary has been all along. We start in one place, we imagine stuff, we go on a bit of a roundabout adventure, we end up where we intended, but you never quite know where you're going to go on the way, but you end up where you wanted to end up. That's been my primary experience. It's very Hywel Roberts.
Well, I think it's amazing. I think, I can see from the production timeline here, which we have to bring it to an end, because we do. But I'll say this: I feel like we talk to a lot of people. Some of the people are researchers, cognitive scientists, and knowledge, evangelists. And I think you represent a kind of philosophy of education, which is it's vital. It's so important that we see this as part of the whole, and it's inspiring. It's literally inspiring, because you feel like we need this. We need this to be in the way that we think about education. It's so important. It's not a small thing. And the way you capture it in the books and in your person, in the way you talk, it's beautiful. It's wonderful. And I think the more people kind of think, we need this, let's hold on to it, let's amplify it, the better. So massive thank you. And I just think people need to get into this stuff and think, imagine your children had this type of experience in their teaching compared with if they didn't. It's like, please, can we have it? You want it. Powerful.
I'm so grateful, and thanks very much for that, Emma and Tom, and thanks for those words at the end there. It does mean a lot, and because I feel sometimes like a pedagogical nomad traveling place to place. And so it's quite nice to have a platform like this to share the stuff as well. So thanks for your support of the book.
I've written more notes listening to you than I've written listening to anyone recently. I've written an entire side listening to you. So thank you, Hal. That's been as refreshing and as joyful as it could possibly be. So thank you so much for your time. It's been lovely.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so look, you know, get Gal to come to your school or get hold of the book, but just above everything else, encourage people to just take that approach to your curriculum and the way you view your role. Just, you know, bring the kids. And that thing to me of recently I've been writing this blog, a sort of thread, this sort of theme I've been mining around the kid in the corner. You know, what's it like to sit in the corner and watch all this happening? And that thing of protecting kids in, I see it all the time. Kids who are just not in and kind of out, I think, because they're just, and this stuff of bringing them in, making them feel secure in the learning space. It's not a small thing. It's big. And if this is one way in, why wouldn't you take it? You know, why wouldn't you take it? So look, thank you. We have to wrap it up. Thank you once again, Al. And thanks to everyone listening. We're coming towards the end of our run for the year, so we're having some amazing guests. It's been a brilliant year, and thanks for listening. We're blown away by how many people listen. The other day, I actually met someone who said it was nice to put a face to the voice. I'm thinking, oh my God, she'd heard me on this before. I didn't even know what I looked like. I was thinking, that's so weird. That's never happened before. So thank you for listeners. You know, people not just watching on the YouTube, but listening. It's really fantastic. We're really thrilled, and keep doing it. So thanks everybody. Have a great summer, and we'll speak to you really soon.